Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about massive missile strike that took place during the previous night. But before this, several important updates that we got from Russia. Russia is close to launch serial production of a new ballistic missile, the Iskander-M, which will have a range twice as long as the original and will be able to strike at 1000 kilometers. That was stated by the specialized publication Military Watch magazine. If the Russians are able to launch this serial production of this type of weapon, then the Russians will have no problems to begin bombing and attacking the most western part of Ukraine. But as for the 1st of February, during the previous 12 hours, the Russians carried out another massive missile strike, mainly using ballistic missiles of Iskander type. There were a lot of explosions on the territory of the city by the name of Odessa, and we got several reports from Ukrainian monitor channels, and later we start receiving pictures and geolocations. For example, in this photo you can see the consequences of Russian attack in the vicinity of the Bristol Hotel in the central part of Odessa. The sources are saying that the Russians destroyed the hotel, and later we start receiving different speculations on this topic, on this matter. Some sources were saying that there was something like diplomatic mission of Norwegians, but later we got report that they left Odessa in the direction of Romania or in the direction of airfield. Zelensky also confirmed that some diplomatic mission of Norwegians was attacked by the Russians. The other sources reported that there was the delegation from France, of military delegation from France, that were trying to share experience with the Ukrainians of use of FPV drones and other different modern equipment, and they'd like to share experience they got in Africa. So a lot of talks, a lot of speculations, but later we got another analysis from the Russian side, and according to the Russian analysis, the Russians were trying to attack the seaport, and the seaport was damaged and destroyed because the source reported that several explosions were spotted there, and also the Russians were trying to attack the Ukrainian as a recruit center, but most likely the Ukrainians, as a use of air defense system, managed to bring down that Russian missile that was flying towards the recruit center. And now the consequences of Russian attack we can see in the vicinity of Bristol Hotel. Anyway, we don't know the exact number of losses the Ukrainians suffered during those attacks, but most likely today the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation will provide us additional updates. Furthermore, as you can see, according to this map, we have a lot of missile strikes in the eastern part of Ukraine. The explosions took place in the settlement of Pavlograd. There were explosions in the territory of Kharkiv. There were explosions in Mirnograd. There were explosions in Akhtirka, and of course there were several explosions on the territory of the city of Sumy. The main purpose of this attack most likely was to ruin the Ukrainian plans, possible plans to begin another wave of offensive operation deep inside the territory of Russia. The biggest consequences of Russian ballistic missile strike took place in the city of Poltava. The Ukrainian sources began publishing information, photos and pictures of consequences of Russian Iskander attack. According to information we have, there was a crash into a 5-story building in Poltava. The entire, let's say, part of the building was reduced to ruins. So this is the photo from another angle. As you can see, a 5-story building was almost completely destroyed and reduced to ruins as a result of Russian Iskander strike. This is the same building, but from another angle. The Russians are saying that this is the consequences of Ukraine air defense work, so that the Russians were trying to hit something else, some military object, but Ukraine air defense systems trying to destroy Russian missile, damage or destroyed the 5-story building. Another important video is coming from the area along the border, and this is very interesting video. The Russians, I remind you that since the beginning of this week, the Russians began actively using their fiber optic drones on the territory of the Sumy region. And the Ukrainians didn't expect this. Of course, they didn't expect, because they supposed that the Russians can attack the Ukrainian vehicles and the concentration of the forces just on the territory of Sudzha. But the Russians managed to get as close as possible their forces to the border, and now they start attacking Ukrainian vehicles on the territory of Sumy. For example, in this video we can see something like a special operation carried out by the Russians. Basically, in this video we can see let's say dozens of FPV drone attacks on Ukrainian vehicles, on Ukrainian checkpoints, on the concentration of Ukrainian forces, and this is something like an ambush. And obviously the Ukrainians will be forced to change their plans, because as you can see, the Ukrainians are moving in this part of the Sumy region without being afraid of any Russian ambush or any Russian attack. But now we see that most likely the Ukrainians will be forced to change their plans in the future. I'll remind you that currently there are very heavy clashes for the settlement of Sverdlikova, and during the previous day we got lots of reports that the Russians managed to enter the western outskirts of the settlement, and that there are currently very heavy clashes on the territory of this small village. So the only possible and the only, let's say, more or less good way to support Ukrainian forces in the territory of the settlement is to send forces using these fields. And since the beginning of January, we received lots of icons and lots of geolocations of the significant number of vehicles and trucks and tanks that were destroyed by the Russians. So there are very heavy clashes in this area. But most likely during the next several days, the Russians will be able to establish complete control over the settlement of Sverdlikova. Another video we got from behind of the village. In this video we can see the vehicle of the armored force of Ukraine that was also destroyed as a result of FPV drone attack. So let's wait for additional updates. Most likely something is going to be changed in this area. And also we receive a lot of updates from the southern part of Sudzha. According to different mappers, the Russians continue their offensive operation in the direction of the settlement by the name of Guyeva. As for the previous night, the Russians managed to improve their positions and to get as close as possible to the settlement itself. Also, we got a lot of reports from different reliable pro-Russian resources, and according to them, the Russians, as we discussed yesterday, managed to break through the defense in the area of Makhnovka, and currently there are very heavy clashes already on the territory of the settlement of Zamostia. If this information is correct, and if this information is confirmed during the next 24 hours, then this will mean the significant breakthrough of the armored force of Russian Federation right in the direction of the heart of the Sudzha direction. We're talking about the city of Sudzha itself. Furthermore, we continue receiving updates from the territory of Ruskaya Porечная. I'll remind you that shocking crimes uncovered in Kursk region. Ukrainian soldiers accused of mass executions and rapes. Russian investigators have identified Ukrainian soldiers from the 92nd Assault Brigade, including senior soldier Evgeny Fabryshenko, as the suspects in the brutal killings and sexual violence against civilians in Ruskaya Porечная. Over 20 victims were found with evidence of torture and executions. And furthermore, this situation was also discussed in the UN, in the Organization of United Nations. The UN opposed the killing of civilians, including in the village of Ruskaya Porечная, Kursk region. This was stated by the spokesperson for the UN Secretary General. Another important thing, Ruskaya Porечная is just a small village that was under occupation of the armored forces of Ukraine just for 1 or 2 or 3 months, let's say. But it's very difficult to imagine the situation, let's say, in the city of Sudzha itself, in Kasachia, Lokny, in Martinovka, in all these territories, because more like several thousands of Russians were encircled by the Ukrainians, and these people didn't have and still don't have any possibilities to evacuate from this territory. And most likely, the deeper and the further the Russians are moving towards the border, the more cases and crimes, war crimes, we're going to see and we're going to face. And this is exactly what Zelensky is afraid of most of all, because he has his own Bucha, and he uses Bucha as something that to blame Russia and to show the Russians as the evil in the world. But now we see that Ukrainian soldiers are doing the same on the territory of Russia. And once again, the further and the deeper the Russians are moving, the more war crimes times we are going to see. Now let's discuss the situation along the original line of combat contact. The head of Russian army, the commander-in-chief, the chief of the general staff of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, Valery Gerasimov, today visited the group of forces East. He inspected the group. He awarded soldiers that were involved in the battle for Velika Novoselovka and Ugledar, most likely, and the most important, the general, the chief of general staff, gave additional orders to the Russian army what to do next. So we expect that in the very near future, the situation around Velika Novoselovka and in the entire the South Donetsk direction will intensify. As for the previous 24 hours, according to information we have, the Russians managed to improve their positions in the vicinity of the settlement of Novoselka, and the Russians managed to answer the stronghold, the company stronghold, to the west of the settlement of Razdolne. So the Russians have begun moving. Let's wait and see what is going to be next. As for the Andreevka fortified area, during the previous 24 hours, the pro-Ukrainian sources confirmed additional progress on the ground from the southern part and additional progress on the ground between the settlement of Petropavlovka and Andreevka itself. Currently, there are very heavy clashes. The Russians continue destroying and attacking Ukrainian vehicles abandoned by the armed forces of Ukraine. The Russian ground troopers continue offensive operation in the area of the settlement of Dachne and Andreevka itself. As for the Pokrovsk direction, during the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything special, just the regular activities. But if we compare the situation now and during the previous 3 days, we see that the Russians intensified their activities. Maybe the Russians, after a very short operational pause, began their offensive operation. If you remember, yesterday we were talking about Ukraine offensive operation, the Russian offensive operation in the area of Zdvizhenka. We got some geolocations, but we didn't know whether the Russians managed to improve their positions or not. And today the pro-Ukrainian sources reported that as a result of that attack that took place yesterday, the Russians managed to take under complete control the village of Baranovka. So let's take a look at the geolocation again. This is the video that was published by pro-Ukrainian sources. In this video that was published yesterday, we can see lots of Russian vehicles that were moving in the northern direction. And today the pro-Ukrainian sources have adjusted their map, coloring the settlement of Baranovka under complete Russian control. So most likely the settlement of Baranovka fell in Russian hands as a result of that attack. Now let's discuss the situation in the Toretsk agglomeration. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly, and we see a very huge, very big dynamic in this area. For example, this is the situation by the end of the 30th of January, this is the situation by the end of the 31st of January, and this is the situation by the end of the 1st of February. So we see that the Russians took a decision to take under complete control the village of Sherbenovka, to take under complete control the fields and the tree lines and the fortifications in this pocket, and to take under complete control the village of Novospaska. So most likely during the next week or 2 weeks, everything inside of these red lines would be captured by the Russians, and this is something like an operation to maintain the line of combat contact and to get ready before further offensive operation in the direction of Constantinople. And we see that now the Russians are advancing along N32 road. We just discussed this, and they intensify their activities on the eastern flank. So the battle for this pocket and the battle for Constantinople, Konstantinovka, is about to be started. Another details are coming from the battle of Chasiv Yar. Today the Ukrainian sources published the video how they were attacking the Russian units in this part of the city. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. We see the dynamic in this area is also pretty big. So this is how the map was changing just for 1 week. This is the situation by the end of the 28th of January. During the 29th of January, the Russians managed to take another elevation. During the 30th of January, the Russians improved their positions in the forest. During the 31st of January, the Russians attacked the Ukrainian positions in the micro district of Shevchenka. And today we see that the Russians managed to maintain the lines between the southern flank and the western flank. So we see that the Russians are advancing, and most likely the battle for the city of Chasiv Yar is going to be finished in the very, very near future. As for the Sivas direction, during the previous 24 hours, we got several videos of how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions, but without any changes on the ground. We still haven't received any details about further Russian progress in the territory of the western Verkhnya Kamenka. As for the Liman direction, during the previous 24 hours, just a regular activity of the Russian FPV drones and Russian units. The Russians were bombing and attacking Ukrainian vehicles, Ukrainian positions, Ukrainian mortar systems, but without any changes on the ground. As for the northern direction, today the pro-Ukrainian sources confirmed that indeed the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over the settlement of Novomlinsk. I'll remind you that yesterday the pro-Russian and pro-Ukrainian sources published a lot of videos from this side. So there were lots of FPV drone attacks, and based on these videos, most likely the pro-Ukrainian sources came to a conclusion that the settlement of Novomlinsk was captured completely. Most likely today the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation will confirm this information. So as you can see, the situation is very difficult in Ukraine, and furthermore the Ukrainians are getting mad. Zelensky is getting mad, as we understand, and today there was very important statement made by one of the Ukrainian deputy. He reported that killing Putin is the best investment in the world, and that was stated by Ukrainian deputy Goncharenko during his speech at PASE. So of course one can say that Zelensky and Ukrainians are trying to escalate the conflict, but something tells me that this statement, like killing Putin is the best investment in the world, is something like an attempt to distract the world's attention. If you remember, several days ago, Tucker Carlson, the journalist from the United States of America, stated that that Democrats wanted to kill Putin, and Russia, from their side, sent a message, a letter to the Congress of the United States of America to begin investigation about this statement. And now we see that Ukrainians suggested killing Putin. So I think that this is an attempt to distract attention and once again to blame Ukraine in every single scene. Another important statement we got from Venezuela. Let's discuss this in details. According to information we have, the CNN reports that US President Donald Trump has sent an envoy to the president of Venezuela. Richard Grenell, President Donald Trump's special representative for special assignments, is expected to meet with Nicolas Maduro today on this 1st of February. Also, we got the same report from the Russian side. A Russian defense minister plane is currently approaching Venezuela. So something tells me that the representative of Russian Federation, representative of US, will have a meeting on the territory of Caracas of Venezuela with the purpose probably to discuss the peace negotiation and the truce and the ending of the conflict in Ukraine. So let's wait and see let's wait for additional details, but obviously we are going to receive something interesting. Furthermore, Donald Trump, the president of the United States of America, have already confirmed this information. He stated that that we are going to talk to Putin and do something very significant. Who knows, maybe in the territory of Venezuela we are going to see the negotiation process and something like a signing of the peace agreement between Russia and the US. And let's wait and see. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.